Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Podcast Daily. It is a Thursday, and it is time to look at the opponent across enemy lines for Ohio State, as it were. That's Bill Landis, and I'm Austin Ward. We're normally here, but the guy who's not is our very special guest, Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, one of the finest in the profession, a man with exquisite taste in beer and sports teams, and he's also a Liverpool fan.
That's true. That's true. I don't know what you were doing Sunday afternoon, Austin, but I was watching Liverpool finish it off at the Lesser White Hart Lane.
Well, you can't beat that. And it was probably a more enjoyable experience than covering the Indiana Hoosiers recently. You've been having to, I think, dig through a lot of contracts and talk to the fan base about Tom Allen, and that's probably been a lot of fun for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just fair to say things are not great just in general for Indiana. The team is frankly getting the results it's performing to. Fans are frustrated. I mean, listen, anytime you're losing, fans are restless. But I do think that, in some ways, fans have kind of started to join 2022 to 2021. But in some ways, they haven't. And what I mean by that is 2021 was like intensely disappointing for IU fans because, and I think I said this in the preseason to your rivals, your rival Doug up in Cleveland. But I said IU fans are used to being disappointed, but not like that. Not being told that they're going to have a good team and they're going to go to a bowl and maybe they could get one of those they beat Ohio State at home on Saturday night in October. They storm the field upsets, to just being so abysmal in 2021. There was an extent to which, while I think fans were aggressively skeptical after that, there was also this sense of, that was a season of extremes, extremely high expectations, extremely low performance, the valleys and the peaks and all that. 2022 hasn't really been that. It's just been uninspiring. And right. So, while there is an extent to which fans are kind of joining the two to say, well, we're 5 and whatever in the last 2, year plus, this is not good enough. There's also, I think, just been a little bit more of the sort of normal starting to disengage, passion dying, apathy that you see when programs go in this direction. And to be really clear, I don't think Tom Allen's getting fired. If you ask me my opinion, I don't even think he should get fired, this year. But having said that, Indiana's going to be probably a pretty comfortable underdog in each of its last 3 games. If that bears out, then 5 wins in 2 years is obviously a concerning trend, especially at a place that, because of all of the attendant factors, doesn't tend to have the bounce back ability of just, like a Harbaugh at Michigan, no, we're just going to set all this right in one go and boom, we're back there. Mm-hmm. Indiana doesn't have that power most of the time. And so that's, I think, why long term you're concerned if you're an IU fan or in the administration or whatever.
Yeah. Zach, how did this happen? Is it just that the extent to which the program had taken a step forward in 2020, was that just really over exaggerated and overstated because that season was so weird, and that because of that, the expectations got out of whack? Or was there a misstep along the way after that season that has not allowed IU to kind of build momentum after it?
Yeah, I mean, there's some micro and some macro to that. First of all, I do kind of reject the idea that COVID was just a fluke. Indiana went to 3 bowls in 5 years before the COVID season. Mm-hmm. And between 2015 and 2020, Indiana's worst result in any single season was taking bowl eligibility into the Purdue game and then losing to Purdue. So there was this, only once from 2013 to 2020 did Indiana fail to win at least 5 games. There was a competitive floor that had really been raised for Indiana. And that was across 2 different coaching staffs, as Ohio State fans will know. And 2 coaches that are very different. One's very offensive minded, one's very defensive minded. Kevin Wilson recruited Ohio. Tom Allen recruited Florida. The point is, there were some obvious differences here that should have been disruptive. If this was just sort of a Kevin Wilson started something Tom Allen couldn't sustain kind of thing. And none of that happened. 2020, as weird as it was, from a sort of fan perspective, it's not hard to talk yourself into the idea that like that was just a natural culmination of 4 or 5 years of really good, measured, patient, persistent team building and program building at Indiana. You know, at the macro level, my sort of main theory about what happened to Indiana in 2021 was basically that you had a lot of guys that probably felt like they'd accomplished a lot of what they came to Indiana to accomplish. And so then there was this, okay, we're going to go one more time and we're going to go even further. And the fans are going to be with us this time. So we're going to, you know, there'll be field stormings and celebrations and, you know, sort of great moments. And then when all of a sudden, you know, you get smacked around at Penn State and you're 2-3 and Michael Penix is out injured again, and you need to look around the room and say, okay, we need to just sort of rally together and consolidate and try to get to 6-6. I think there maybe were a number of guys in that room that thought, well, I don't know if I've got that in me. I don't know that I've got that, you know, that ability to reset my expectations and sort of harden myself against the direction this season is going and push back one more time. Mm-hmm. At the micro level, I think a big part of what happened is Indiana's offensive line just decayed badly. I mean, Indiana's offensive line, even if you go back and watch some of those individual games in 2020, I mean, there were some, you know, Penn State, which was such a dramatic win for Indiana, Ohio State, which was such a dramatic day for Indiana. Offensive line still wasn't playing very well in many of those games. And it really kind of folded in on itself last year and has not improved this year. And so what you've had is, and listen, the defense had a ton of injuries in 2021 and has not quite risen back to the level that we thought it would, given what they returned. Some guys opted to come back for one more year. Tom Allen took over play calling duties again. But I think at the micro level, a lot of it has just been that Indiana has lost all sense of itself from a competence perspective offensively. And a lot of that starts with, it was obviously not limited to offensive line play, not being able to give you a base that allows you to compensate for not having just a ton of, you know, crazy athletic playmakers that could, you know, maybe on the other side compensate for an underperforming offensive line. So at the macro level, like I think last year was just sort of like a tailspin nobody could control. And then, you know, you come into this season and there's a lot of sort of resetting expectations and we're going to be tougher and we're going to push back. And they started 3-0. It was a shaky 3-0, but they did start 3-0. But I think that the micro level, I mean, just frankly, Indiana's not a great football team. And in particular, their weaknesses are where you can't have weaknesses, which is offensive line, you know, defensive line, a secondary that's not been bad, but certainly hasn't been as good as we thought it could be. And then therefore underperformance at quarterback, underperformance at skill positions. You know, you can just keep going.
Zach, what is the situation at quarterback this week?
Connor Bazelak is back. He's healthy. Tom Allen never told us he was injured. It's kind of strange. And this is one of those things that raises an eyebrow because Tom Allen's never really been this way before. He was really sort of like dodgy and obfuscative after the bye week, saying every single, you know, every position got reviewed during the bye week and, you know, every job was up for grabs. And so we asked about quarterback and, you know, he said, well, you're just going to find out on Saturday. He wouldn't specify anything. Then we get to Saturday and it turns out Connor Bazelak's been injured all week. And so normally Tom Allen would just say if a guy was injured, you know, yeah. Especially with such a sort of natural backup in Jack Tuttle, he would just say Jack Tuttle's starting, Connor Bazelak's hurt. Then we find out Bazelak, at least by Tom Allen's sort of pronouncements, it sounded like maybe not one specific injury. He was just really beat up. So they gave him a week off, which is strange, but whatever. So then there's all this sort of misdirection. They start Jack Tuttle, then he gets hurt. He hurt his shoulder. He's, I think, kind of week to week right now. Dexter Williams, I thought the redshirt sophomore had some, in what was actually his college debut, had some good moments and some bad moments against Penn State. Bazelak is back. Bazelak will start. I don't think it's a situation, you know, I don't want to say anything definitively because Tom Allen has been sort of out of character around this. He's not usually so evasive and so sort of intentionally smoke and mirrors vague. Mm-hmm. I do, though, tend to believe him that, like, it's going to be Bazelak. It's not Bazelak until he keeps screwing up, and then they'll go to somebody else. If you see Dexter Williams, my guess is that it would be more in it's 35-7 with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. We're just going to put the kid in to get some snaps because this game is too far gone. But
wow, Indiana's going to have a 35-7 lead. Wow, that's incredible.
And then they're really going to pour it on when they bring the backup in.
There we go. Yeah.
But no, it's just kind of weird because this has been out of character for Tom Allen in being this cagey and this evasive. There are times where he won't tell us things, but when he won't tell us, he'll basically just say, I'm not telling you because I want the competitive advantage or whatever. He's not usually so sort of, like I said, smoke and mirrors. And so my point is, it's going to be Bazelak. I can't tell you how hurt he was. I don't know how fragile he's going to be in this game. I'm not even completely positive who his backup is because we don't know exactly what Jack Tuttle's status is. All I can say definitively is that Bazelak will start, and then from there, my guess is if he's able to play, he will remain the quarterback as long as the game remains remotely competitive.
I remember Indiana played like 3 quarterbacks against Ohio State last year too, right? It was that was an odd game where I don't think we knew who was going to be going into it, and then over the course of the game, I think in the first half, even three different guys played at the quarterback position in that game. It was kind of strange. I want to flip to the other side, Zach. The Dasan McCullough, former Ohio State commit, I think a guy that was in the class people were really excited about. How does Indiana use him, I guess, and I don't know, in terms of playmakers to look out for on the defensive side of the ball for the Hoosiers, where does he rank on that list?
He's high on it. Indiana plays him at a number of spots. They'll play him at one of their DN spots they call the Bull. They'll play him at a couple different linebacker spots. Like they run what in essence is a 4-2-5. They have 3 linebacker spots, but one of them is basically sort of optional based on what if they're playing a power offense, they'll play 3 linebackers essentially. When Cincinnati was playing 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, Indiana played 3 linebackers. They'll move him around those linebacker spots a little bit. That can be a little bit selective. I think they've had to basically they did this because they just wanted to get him on the field. They just wanted to say, like, we want him to be able to play like 3 or 4 different, I don't say 4, but at least 3 different positions because we want to just be able to get him on the field no matter what. I think they've probably had to pull that back just a little bit because Cam Jones has been hurt. And so they've had to be a little bit more creative at linebacker, which has probably forced them to sort of reserve his snaps for a little bit more specific, like just specific to 1 or 2 positions. I think you'll see a lot of him at the Bull. He is, athletically, Indiana doesn't have anybody like him. He's his build, his ability to close space very quickly. He's still raw. He still makes mistakes at times. There's definitely times where he makes freshman mistakes. He over pursues. He makes bad reads and just kind of dives in on things. But the flip side is, he has the ability, like early in the season, Indiana was trying to pivot back to something that worked really well for them in the COVID season that they had to get away from because of injuries last year, which was a lot of blitzing from what they call their Husky position, which is essentially sort of their hybrid safety nickel linebacker guy. And their Husky is, sorry, that's my washing machine. If you can hear that, it's on the other side of this wall. Not sure what's going on there. That's probably not good. Their Husky, their starting Husky is a senior named Noah Pierre, who is very talented, but is not very big. And every time they brought Noah Pierre on a blitz, teams just threw into the blitz, and he was too small to disrupt it. They've stopped doing nearly as much of it. They'll find ways to scheme up Dasan McCullough doing it instead, and not playing him with that Husky. They're not going to expect that much of him in coverage right now. But when he does it, even if he doesn't get to the quarterback, he can't throw into it because he's 6'4", he's 6'5", he's got long arms, he's got great sort of reaction times and things like that. So athletically, he's right up there, especially with Cam Jones out. And I don't know if Cam Jones will play this weekend. He's been out for several weeks. They keep saying he's getting closer, but we'll see. He wants to come back. He's out of eligibility after this year. So I think literally, even if he could just play like the Purdue game and nothing else, I think he would do it. But especially with Cam Jones out, when you're talking about guys that you need to not just make the run of the mill plays, but like the game changing plays, whether it's the sack, the turnover, or sometimes even like a couple times this season, we've seen him chase somebody down from behind and stop a touchdown. And then maybe you turn that into a field goal and that saves you 4 points. He's at or near the top of that list, especially if you kind of break this defense into its two chunks, which are like the front 5-6, the guys that bring the pass rush, the pressure, et cetera, and then the secondary. In the box, in and around the box, he's as high on that list as anybody.
Zach, one of my favorite things is your Kevin Wilson impersonation, which is really uncanny. What were your experiences like covering Kevin Wilson? What was your favorite or funniest moment during that tenure?
So Kevin was in Indiana for 6 years, and Kevin was genuinely a lot of fun. And I think even he might, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing even Kevin would admit that, Indiana had to adjust to him a little bit. He came from Oklahoma. He was walking into an IU football program that really, obviously it doesn't necessarily have a ton of advantages right now, but I mean, it was just finishing its weight room then. It hadn't revamped its locker room, all those different kinds of things. So Kevin definitely needed to adjust to Indiana a little bit. Indiana needed to adjust to Kevin. And what I mean by that is, like, Kevin taught Indiana how a modern Power 5 program should behave, how to recruit, how to develop, how to strength train. The extent to which he looked around and just said, there's so much you're doing wrong from an infrastructural perspective, but also from like a talent acquisition perspective, how you're targeting coaches, what you're doing with strength training, all those kinds of things. And some of it was just Indiana had, in the 90s and early 2000s, had made a ton of bad financial decisions that left the department. Indiana was in the red financially up until about 2007, 2008. So Kevin was hired in 2010. That was when Indiana was finally getting to be able to use Big Ten money to build things and all that, BTN money to build stuff. But I would say by like year 3, year 4, things had really, like, Indiana had really settled into, what Kevin wanted. Obviously he built, what around here is a generational offense in 2015. It was the first, I don't know if anybody's done it since, but it was the first Big Ten team since, I think, 1995 Ohio State to have a 3,500 yard passer, 2,000 yard rushers, and a 1,000 yard receiver all in the same offense. And Kevin also definitely got more comfortable. Like, I don't know if anybody knows what Little 5 is, but he started attending the Little 500, which is a spring bike race in Bloomington. It's a big tradition. 20,000 people go every year. Mm-hmm. He started attending basically every year. He really, I think, kind of started to have fun on Twitter and things like that. And I think if you ask for like a funny Kevin Wilson story, the one that jumps to mind the most was, I don't remember what year it was. It definitely would have been more toward the end of his tenure. One of his last spring seasons, Indiana got like a spring snow, and the way that Indiana's indoor practice facility is oriented, it casts a shadow on one of its practice outdoor fields most of the time. And, like, as an example, one of the things Kevin asked for almost immediately was to turn that field into turf, because when it would rain or when it would snow, that part of the field would just turn into a mud pit. And he's like, we can't have one of our practice fields just not be usable. Mm-hmm. And it was just the sort of thing where Indiana was like, oh yeah, maybe we should have thought of that. Like, how did we not think of that? But anyway, so by this point it was turf and there was snow all over it. And like, Kevin broke, and it was around the Harlem Shake time, because they played the Harlem Shake and all the players ran out and started jumping around in the snow. And Kevin went out and laid down on his back and started making snow angels. and it was like, it was just, for a guy who, as you guys know, can be serious, can be very sort of just like football, whatever. He could still let his hair down from time to time. And, obviously, what I said a lot around the time he was fired was, I played football in high school in the early 2000s. I'm not absolving Kevin of everything he did. I'm not passing judgment on everything he did. I recognize a lot of what my coaches did to me and some of Kevin's methods. The biggest thing I would ultimately say is, if your boss told you to stop doing something, or you'd get fired and found out you'd done it again, or you were still doing it, you're probably getting fired. That's true of me. It's true of you. It was true of him. So, you can, in that debate will go on forever because there are people around here who miss Kevin, who miss his personality, who certainly miss his offenses. Because I don't know that I've ever been around a coach that was smarter talking about offense than Kevin Wilson.
Right.
But it was an interesting time. And I mean, he had a lot of success, especially in recruiting. I mean, is Indiana going to have 2 All-Americans on the same offensive line for 3 years again? I don't know when that's going to happen, but
yeah. Well, he gave us some pretty competitive Indiana-Ohio State games. I'm not sure that we're going to get one on Saturday, but I guess we'll find out at noon. We appreciate very much Indy Star's Zach Osterman joining us, one of our best friends on the beat, a Big Ten gift, I would call him, to journalism. Does that sound right, Zach? Do I owe you any more money for that, or are we good?
That sounds overly generous.
Okay.
That sounds like a gift unto itself.
All right. Well, I did the best I could. We do appreciate his time and his coverage. You can find that, as always, at the Indy Star. Subscribe and get his work there. If you need more information about the Hoosiers and he didn't cover it on the podcast daily with us. For Zach and Bill, I am Austin. Enjoy the rest of your day. We will see you for more coverage on the podcast and ohiostate.rivals.com.